Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2023 Chevy Equinox, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster Smart Diode wiring kit for vehicles with LED taillights. But before we get into that, why don't we take a minute, check these out, and make sure they're going to work for you. So this is a really good example on how the diode wiring kit is going to work. So we got the left turn signal going on our motorhome, and it's transferring it back here to our Equinox, and that'll hold true for the right turn, our tail lights, and our brake lights. So we'll have all of our bases covered there. And I want to mention with this kit, it's designed to work for the Equinoxes that have the LED type tail lights. Not all of them will have LEDs. Some will have the incandescent bulbs, just the regular, classic style bulbs. If your Equinox is equipped with that, there's a kit designed to work with that style as well. But when it comes to picking out tow bar wiring, 99% of the time I recommend a diode kit, and really for a few different reasons. One of them, it's going to look pretty much factory once you have it all hooked up. You don't see anything extra. You don't have to really modify anything or anything along those lines for the most part. And it's super easy to hook up. You literally just have to plug in. So really nothing to it there, really simple. And to me, that beats out other style of tow bar wiring, like magnetic lighting, for example. That's a kit where you'd have to, they're magnets, they'd stick on the vehicle, which, not sure, this might even be aluminum. A lot of new cars are, so it won't even work if it was the case. But with those, you have to run your wires up every time, plug it in, take it all apart when you're done, and then you got a big old box of parts you need to store when you're over the road and whatnot. So not too crazy about that style, but with these, like I said, nothing to really store and super straightforward when it comes to hooking it up. So like I said, when you're ready to hook up, you're just gonna have to plug your tow bar wiring right into the connector plug up front here. Which kind of brings me to my next point. This kit is not going to come with a 6-way round connector or the umbilical cord like we have here. So if you don't have those, you will have to grab them separately. When it comes to picking that out though, a couple things to look for. So sometimes tow bars will come with that stuff. So perfect example, the Roadmaster Nighthawk tow bar comes with the cable and comes with the connector plug. So obviously, if you had this, you wouldn't need to grab more of them. But if not, there's a couple things to look for. If your tow bar has channels in it that allows you to run a cable through there, you're going to want a cable like this, which is a hybrid one. So it's straight and then coiled, lets you utilize that channel. And then there's just straight cables as well that would work. If your tow bar does not have channels, you would want the coiled style cable only. So the whole cable would be like this, and that's to allow it to sit up tight off the ground when you're going straight, but then stretch out when you make those turns. So just something I thought was worth mentioning. I figured it'd be useful just to kind of refresh ourselves on the main parts that we're going to need to flat tow our Equinox down the road in the first place. First main component will be your base plate, and that's going to provide us with a solid and reliable attachment point. That way we can hook our tow bar up. Tow bar is going to be the second component, and that's going to be the physical link that actually connects the front of your Chevy to the back of your motorhome. Third main part will be safety cables, and these are just there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. We're going to keep everything hooked up to each other. The fourth main part will be your tow bar wiring, and what this is going to do is transfer the lighting functions from the back of your coach to the back of your Equinox, keeping you safe and legal. And the fifth main component will be a supplemental braking system. And what this is going to do is apply the brakes in your Chevy whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome, bringing you to a more controlled and predictable stop. And then there's one other component I like to recommend, which is a battery charge line kit. And what that'll do is kind of trickle charge or maintain the battery in your Equinox whenever you're flat towing it down the road, because a lot of these braking systems will use the Chevy's battery power to operate, and so by using a charge line, it'll keep the battery in tip top and allow everything to function properly. Other than that, at the end of the day, a wiring kit you really can't go wrong with. We've done a ton of these diode wiring kits from Roadmaster and rarely run into any issues. They're really reliable. As far as the installation goes, it's not really complicated per se. Definitely time consuming though, because you have to run a lot of wires from the front to the back, but you know, it'll all pay off. You get that ease of use after it's installed and you won't have to mess with it again. So well worth it, at least in my opinion. But if you'd like to hang around, we'll go ahead, pull into the garage and get started on it now. To begin our installation, we're gonna be here at the front of our Equinox. You know, clearly we have the front fascia removed, and that's because we're doing this at the same time that we're doing our wiring and our base plate and everything else, which is what I suggest doing. A lot more room to work, but with that said, this can be done with everything put back together. So what we're gonna do first, you can take one end of your diode wiring and just kind of bring it over here to where we're gonna mount it up. Take the rubber dust cover, slide that over, and then we're going to separate those wires. So just carefully cut in between them and peel them back, you know, 3 or 4 inches, something like that. And then what I like to do is straighten them back out and then kind of cut maybe a 1/4 inch off or so. That way if we accidentally nicked one of them when we were separating them, get rid of that. And then we're just going to strip the insulation back on each wire, about like that, and give it a twist. So go ahead and get the other 3 done. You got our wire stripped back. Now we can grab the connector plug and take a closer look at it. So we're going to be using 4 of the terminals. TM is taillights, so our brown wire will go there. GD is ground, so the white wire goes into it. LT is left turn, so the yellow wire goes there. Then RT is right turn, so the green wire will go into it. What you want to do with those, take a small Phillips head screwdriver and back those set screws out almost completely. Try not to pull them all the way out because they're kind of a pain to get back in, especially if you drop it. They're tough to find, but you can take the appropriate wires that we talked about, place it into the correct terminal, and then just tighten down the set screw. This is what the connector plug is going to look like once all the wires are hooked up to it. And I do suggest if you're going to be installing a charge line or anything like that, do it now while you have this apart, and you only have to route your wires one time that way, which is exactly what I'm going to do. So I'll go ahead and get our charge line hooked up back here, and then we can show you how we're going to route our wires. We can get the wiring routed into our engine compartment now, so pretty straightforward. We'll just have it looped around through here and have it running up, kind of right through there, where it's going to come out in our engine compartment. In the engine compartment, our wiring is just going to run up through here, ground our white wire. All right, and there's a factory post right there, which works out really well. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball the length there, cut it to length, and very carefully cut just that white wire. You kind of peel it back a little ways. And the side that you want to hook up is the side that's actually running, you know, to our 6-way connector there at the front of our vehicle. So strip the insulation back, give it a twist. All right, then you can take a ring terminal, place that over the bare end of the wire, and then crimp it down. So it's ready to go. That nut, you can remove that using a 10mm. And slide the ring terminal over the stud there, and we'll tighten this back down. And then with the rest of our white wire, all right, that's just going to nothing, I'm going to remove that completely. It'll make it easier to route the wires, not as many. And you want to hold on to this piece because we're probably going to use it a little bit later on as a jumper wire. So we'll get this completely pulled off and hold on to it. So I continued to route our diode wiring, and it's kind of tough to see from the engine compartment, but essentially I just ran it down along the firewall and straight down to the underside, which it's a little easier to see actually from the bottom. But when you're doing this, you know, you want to make sure to do your best to avoid any hot or moving parts, especially in this area when we're dropping it down. Underneath the vehicle, our wiring's going to drop down, you know, right through this opening here. And you use zip ties to keep it up secured, you know, but from here I just followed our factory lines here. So I just routed it around, and you may or may not have a plastic cover here. If you do, you can remove it, make it easier. It's usually just some 10mm nuts that hold it in place, but just ran this along through here. And again, just using some zip ties to keep it secure. And it's just going to kind of continue along our fuel tank here. Going up and over our subframe. This is an important part too. You know, you have some moving suspension parts, make sure you're clearing them all. But it's going to eventually come out right there. So I ran up and zip tied. And then what I did was just separate the wires like we did at the front. So what we're able to do here with the brown wire is you want to cut it. I'm just going to go about right there. And on one end, and that's going to nothing here, we're going to strip that back quite a bit. You want quite a bit of wire to work with. Twist it and then fold it over on itself like that. Then you can take the butt connector that they give you. They give you a regular yellow one. I upgraded to a heat shrink style, just the end seal up. Helps protect against corrosion a little bit better. But the other one's gonna work fine and work the same exact way as this one. But you slide that over the bare end and crimp it down. The other end of the brown wire here that actually, you know, runs all the way to the front, you're gonna strip that back as well. Twist the wire, and what you want to do now, if you remember that piece of white wire that we saved, grab it and strip the end back, and you're actually going to twist the two wires together. You want to get them nice and tight. And once you have that done, you can take the butt connector there, slide it over both ends. We'll crimp it down. And like I said, since I'm using a heat shrink style, I'll come back with a heat source and seal up the ends. The yellow and brown wire, I kind of just tape them up because these are going to run up to the driver's side taillights. So we'll let these just hang for now. But that green and that white wire that we added, that gets routed over to the passenger side. So I actually just went through our aluminum bumper beam, pushed it through, ran it all the way through it. You can just feed the wiring through. It's really convenient actually. And it comes out on the side there. Zip tied it up and we can let these hang. I want to mention this green wire probably would reach into the taillight pocket. It looked like it was going to be close, so just so we didn't have to deal with it, I did use a butt connector and maybe a couple more feet of green wire I had laying around. You can use whatever color you got if you need to, but butt connected it just to give us some more wire to work with. Come up top and get our taillights removed. Put some painter's tape around the edges here where we might end up having to use a trim tool to pry these off to protect the paint, but there is a couple of fasteners located if you open up the hatch on the inside jamb here, I guess you could call it. So there's these plastic covers, and you can take a small screwdriver, pick, whatever you got, and kind of pop them open. And that will expose 2 T15 Torx bit screws. Pull those out. To get the light out, sometimes they're a pain, others they come right out because there's some tabs, I guess you call them, that are pressed in there. And so you want to work the light, you know, side to side just a little bit, try to loosen everything up. Sometimes you can spray soapy water in there as well. That'll kind of help lubricate it. Or what I like to do, take the palm of your hand, kind of apply pressure like that, and usually you can get it to kind of pop off there. So if you flip the light over, we're going to have an electrical connector that we need to disconnect. Pull back on the red tab, push down in the center. That'll release it. And here's those tabs that I mentioned that are kind of holding this in. But I'll set our light off to the side and do the same thing to get the one on the passenger side removed. So what I've done now is taken our wiring, and there's just some tape that's over it. Peeled that tape off to expose the wires. And we're going to test the circuit for our taillight signal. Now the diodes on them suggest using the brake light signal. However, with that said, we've had some issues in the past making that brake light signal. The lights would do weird stuff. And so what I suggest doing is using the tail light signal. It's going to work the same way and everything else on this particular vehicle. So I got the tail lights on right now, our running lights, and I got a test light, and you can go through each one of the pins until we find the signal. So when I put it to there, we're getting power, and so that pin will be the white wire with the yellow stripe. So this is the wire we're going to be working with. So that wire that we're working with, we're going to cut that probably about there, and then strip that end back, give it a good twist. I'm going to take the terminals, spade terminals that they give you, place it on there, and crimp it down good. And do the same thing for this other end here. Use some type of pull wire. I'm just using a piece of tubing. You can use a metal coat hanger, something along them lines. But drop it down through your taillight pocket, and that'll come out of the bottom of the car. And then you can take the wires, tape it to that pull wire, and then feed these right up into position. So our new wires that we pulled up, I just cut them the length. You know, you don't need 3 extra foot of wire there. I cut them down some and then stripped the ends back and crimped on the red terminals just like we did with those. So nothing really different there. But now you can take your diodes, and one of them is going to say car brake out. You want to plug that into the factory wire closest to the taillight connector plug there. Car brake in, that'll be the other factory wire. So that'll push on. And then the RV brake, you're going to plug the new yellow wire onto that one. And then RV tail, of course, that'll be the new brown wire. The kit's going to come with a couple of pieces of short pieces of white wire. You can strip the ends back. One end, crimp on a spade terminal. The other end, you'll crimp on a ring terminal. Same exact way we've been doing it. And then this is going to get grounded. So I'll take the provided self-tapper. So that's grounded. And then the other end of this can just get plugged into the last remaining terminal, which is labeled ground. Over on the passenger side, we got this one set up essentially the same exact way as the driver's side, really no differences. One of the differences though is the color of the factory wire. So this one is purple in color. So, you know, car brake out, factory purple wire closest to the connector, other side of the purple wire goes to car brake in. The new white wire that we ran, that's RV tail. The new green one, that's RV brake. And of course our ground wire, you know, we got that set up the exact same way. So what you can do now is take the taillight, plug that back in, and we can secure our diodes here. I just want to make sure I got enough wire to work with because everything is pretty tight in here. So I think what we might do, maybe go along that edge. There should be some room in there. So there's some sticky tape. We'll just push that down onto there, and that'll get it secured. And we'll reinstall our taillights the opposite way that we removed them. Test our wiring to make sure that it's working properly. So I just plugged into a test box. Probably aren't going to have this at home. You can always use your motorhome, but keep in mind, you know, if your RV has any issues, could mislead you into thinking it's something you did on the vehicle side. But with that said, let's run through our signals. So we'll turn on our taillights. We'll try our left turn signal, our right turn signal, and our brake lights. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster Smart Diode Wiring Kit for vehicles with LED taillights on our 2023 Chevrolet Equinox.